3 handlers bitten in 11 weeks. 31 days in a court-ordered muzzle. 120 pounds of Bullmastiff sitting in the last kennel on the row, with a red card zip tied to the door that had one word printed on it in block letters. Dangerous. Below that, a date and a time. Friday, 9 a.m. A euthanasia hearing in a county courthouse with a cracked marble step in a town of 840 people for a dog nobody had claimed and nobody had named. Every single person who ever put a leash on him agreed on one thing. The dog was born wrong. It was in the intake notes. It was in the volunteer log. It was in the way the staff walked past that kennel with their shoulders turned, the way you walk past a live wire lying in wet grass. Then a 63-year-old Navy veteran walked in for an air compressor and walked out with a foster form. He signed it with one condition. In 14 years of running that shelter, the director had never once seen anybody write a condition in the margin of that form. Not a diet, not a training plan, not a lawyer's name. He wanted an x-ray, not the hips, not the elbows. All of him, nose to tail, paid out of his own pocket before Friday. What that film showed, sitting against the 6th vertebra of that dog's neck, closed a murder case that had been cold for 4 years, 7 months, and 9 days. To understand what was inside that dog, you have to go back to a Tuesday in April. Deacon Vry was 63 years old and stood 6'1" on a morning when his back cooperated, which was not most mornings. His shoulders had gone forward with age the way a barn roof goes forward before it goes down, and he'd stopped fighting it. His hair was white, going gray at the temples. Cut in a crew cut, he still kept navy short, because he'd been doing it since 1981 and saw no reason to stop for the opinion of a mirror. Gray eyes, pale as creek ice, set deep enough that people who didn't know him thought he was angry when he was only listening. A burn scar ran the length of his left forearm from the wrist to the inside of the elbow, shiny and pale and ridged, from a barn fire in 1994 that had killed 9 head of cattle and no people, which he still counted as the best outcome available that night. He wore the same canvas coat 8 months out of 12, the collar gone soft, the right pocket stretched out of shape from 30 years of carrying a pair of channel locks in it. Around his neck, on a bootlace, he wore his wife Ruth's wedding band. She'd been gone 6 years that March. 6 years of supper alone at a table set for one, at a farmhouse on County Road H with a porch light he still turned on at dusk out of habit, for a woman who was not coming up the drive. He was the chief of the Ozark County Volunteer Fire Station. 6 men, 2 trucks, 1 two-bay metal building with a hand-painted number on the door and a coffee maker older than 2 of his firefighters. They ran maybe 90 calls a year, brush fires, chimney fires, a barn owl, and the wrecks. Mostly the wrecks. Highway 5 took a curve out past the low-water bridge that had been eating cars since before Vry was born, and for 30 years he'd been the man with the cutters, the man who leaned into the crushed side of a Buick and put his hand on a stranger's shoulder and told them help us here. You learn things doing that. You learn what a person looks like right before they scream. You learn what a body does when it's protecting something broken that it can't see. Those things go into a man and they don't come back out. That Tuesday in April, Vry drove into town because the shelter had a compressor to give away. Somebody had donated a 20-gallon upright to the Ozark County Animal Shelter, and the shelter had no use for a 20-gallon upright, and the fire stations had blown a head gasket in February. So he backed his truck to the loading door at 10 in the morning with a tie-down strap over his shoulder. Marla Quist met him at the door. 41, short dark hair, she cut herself. Reading glasses pushed up onto her head where she would spend the next 20 minutes looking for them. County polo shirt, faded from the wash, a pin clipped to the collar. She had the particular exhaustion of a person who runs a public animal shelter in a rural county on a budget that hasn't changed since 2016. Not tired in the body, tired somewhere further in. It's in the back, she said. Watch the row. We're full. They were full. 22 runs, 22 dogs, all of it concrete and chain link, and that sound. The sound of a shelter, which is not really barking so much as it is weather. It rose when they walked in and fell behind them as they passed. Except at the end. The last kennel on the row was quiet. The Bullmastiff sat in the middle of the concrete pad, square, front feet planted, and he did not get up and he did not bark and he did not come to the gate. Brindle, dark, the stripes running back into a black mask. 120 pounds, and the shelter scale had underread him for a month because he wouldn't stand still on it. He wore a basket muzzle, black plastic, strapped behind the ears. He was sitting up like a man in a waiting room, not resting, holding a position. Vry stopped walking. "That's the one," Marla said, and there was no need to explain which one, because the red card was right there at eye level. Court order. 31 days in the muzzle. He goes in front of the judge Friday. He lie down. Not that we've seen. Not once. He sleeps sitting against the back wall. Vry put his hand on the chain link, low, palm flat. The dog's eyes came over. Not the head, just the eyes. And that was the first thing, because the paperwork on the clipboard hanging off that gate said the animal was aggressive on approach, and Vry had been around aggressive dogs his whole life. He'd been bitten twice, once bad, and an aggressive dog on approach comes forward. It stands. It fronts. It shows you teeth, and it makes noise, because noise is cheaper than fighting, and every dog on earth knows it. This dog did none of that. He held his head at an angle, cocked maybe 15 degrees down and to the right, and locked there like a man holding a phone against his shoulder. When he tracked Vry along the front of the kennel, he didn't turn his neck. He turned his whole body. Feet moving, spine straight, shoulders and skull going around together like a gun turret. A volunteer came down the row then, a kid of 19 with a slip lead, and opened the gate to move him for cleaning. The kid reached in over the top of the dog's neck to get the loop past the ears, and the dog flinched. Not a snap, not a lunge. He dropped an inch and a half straight down hard, and his eyes squeezed shut, and his back legs shuddered once, and then he froze, absolutely rigid, and let the loop go on. Vry felt the back of his own neck go cold. He had seen that flinch. Not in a dog. He'd seen it in a 50-year-old man pinned in a Silverado on the Highway 5 curve, when Vry reached for his collar to check his airway, and the man made that exact motion, that drop and freeze, because something in his neck was broken and every millimeter cost him. He'd seen it in a woman on a kitchen floor with 3 cracked vertebrae who begged them not to touch her shoulders. That flinch is not fear. Fear moves away from you. That flinch is anticipation of pain from a known direction. "Marla," he said, "read me the bites." She looked at him for a second. Then she went and got the file, because it was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, and she'd been trying to get somebody to look at that dog for 11 weeks. She read it standing in the corridor with her glasses finally down on her nose. January 30th. Handler 1. Intake tech. Reach for the collar to attach a tag. Level 3 bite. Right hand for stitches. She turned the page. February 19th. Handler 2. Bath. Volunteer was toweling him off across the shoulders and back of the neck. Level 3. Left forearm. 6 stitches. Another page. March 11th. Handler 3. That's me. I leaned over him to fit the muzzle. He got my wrist. She held up her left hand without any particular drama. There was a white curve of scar at the base of the thumb. That's the 3. That's the 3. 11 weeks. He's got a bite history and a designation, and Friday morning the county attorney is going to ask the judge to end it. And honestly, Deacon, I don't have an argument. Vry stood there a while. Any of the 3 head on? What? Did he ever bite a hand coming at him from the front? Marla looked down at the file. Turned back a page. Turned forward. No. Did he ever bite over food? No. He eats with people standing right there. Did he ever go a stranger walking past that gate? No. Kids come through here on field trips. He doesn't even stand up. Then you've got 3 bites, Vry said, and all 3 happened when a hand came down onto the top of his neck from above. Collar. Towel. Muzzle strap. He nodded at the kennel. Same 6 inches of dog. Every time. Marla didn't say anything. She looked at the dog, and the dog was sitting square in the middle of the concrete with his head tilted 15 degrees down and to the right, holding it the way you hold a position when moving out of it costs you something. He's not defending territory, Vry said. He's defending a spot. The vet did a wellness check at intake. What did she palpate? Hips, teeth, abdomen. He wouldn't let anyone touch the neck. Marla heard it as she said it. Her mouth closed. Right, Vry said. He asked for the foster form. 14-day temporary custody, standard county paper, 2 carbon copies, a place for a driver's license number, and a place to acknowledge you understood the animal had a dangerous designation and that you assumed all liability. He filled out on the counter by the door with a pen that barely worked. In the blocky all-caps hand he'd been writing incident reports in since he was 30. Then, in a margin, down the right side where there was nothing but white space, he wrote one line and pressed hard enough to go through to the second carbon. Full-body radiographs before hearing at my expense. Marla read it upside down. Full body, nose to tail, every plate. Deacon. She took her glasses off. I want to be straight with you, because you're doing me a kindness, and I'm not going to lie to you for it. Ed Prentice is the county attorney. He's had 2 dangerous dog cases in 6 years, and both dogs were destroyed, and both times he was right. He is not going to move Friday for a dog with 3 bites in 11 weeks. Not for a picture. It's not that he's cruel. It's that a bite log is a legal document and an X-ray is a suggestion. Then it'll be a suggestion with my name on it. 14 days on that form doesn't outrank the court date. Friday is Friday. I know what Friday is. She stamped it. She had him initial the liability box twice. Then she went and got the dog herself, and Vry watched how she did it. From the front, low, the lead held out at the height of the dog's chest, so he could put his own head through it. No hand ever going up over those ears, and he thought she already knew. She just never had the words for it, and nobody ever asked her. The Bullmastiff walked to the truck without pulling. He stood at the tailgate a long moment, looking at the height of it, and then he loaded himself with a grunt that came up out of him like a hinge. The drive out to County Road H is 19 minutes. Vry talked the whole way, because he'd been talking to an empty cab for 6 years, and the habit didn't know the difference. He told the dog about Ruth, about how she used to make him take his boots off on the porch in January, and how he never once did it, about the 6 years of suppers. And then, because the road bends south past the turnoff and you can see the mouth of the hollow from the top of the grade, he told him about Weatherby Creek. Toned out at 7:40 on a Sunday night, October 21, Vry said, "Shooting call. We don't get shooting calls." Sheriff was 22 minutes out. We were 9. He slowed for the low-water bridge out of habit. Fella's name was Nash Farrell, 38 years old. Conservation agent, game warden, folks called him. He'd been working this county 4 years, and he was the kind that wrote you up and then helped you push your truck out of the mud with the citation still in your hand. I was the second man to him. There was nothing to do. There was never anything to do. The dog was sitting up in the passenger seat, head at that angle, not looking at him. They never found who did it. For years now. State Lab had something they wouldn't talk about, some kind of shot they said was unusual, and that's the last anybody heard. He turned in at the gate. His flashlight was in the leaves about 11 feet from him. Station issue. Half melted down one side. And don't ask me how, because there was no fire in that hollow. I bagged it, and it came back to me 3 months later with the property release, and nobody ever came for it. Vry shut the truck off and sat there with his hand on the key. "It's in a coffee can on my workbench," he said. "Been in that can 4 years." The dog turned his whole body, feet, shoulders, skull, all together, and looked at the barn. The farmhouse had been built in 1911, and nobody in 1911 was 6'1". The door between the mudroom and the kitchen sat under a header a hand's width lower than the rest, and Vry had been ducking under it for 31 years without ever once thinking about it. The dog stopped at that doorway and would not go through. Not a refusal with teeth in it. No stiffening, no backing up. He simply arrived at the threshold, looked up at that low beam, and stood there with his weight shifted back off his front feet, breathing through the muzzle in short pulls. Vry called him, slapped his own thigh, went into the kitchen, and came back. The Bullmastiff stayed on the linoleum in the mudroom with the porch light behind him, 120 pounds of animal that could have taken the door frame off the wall if he wanted it. Standing there like the beam was a live wire. Vry watched him for the better part of 2 minutes. Then he went and got a screwdriver out of the drawer, took the door off its hinges, leaned it against the wall in the hall, and went back and stood in the middle of the kitchen without saying anything at all. The dog came through with his head lowered and his shoulders rolled, and he did not touch the frame. Supper was next. Vry had a raised feeder in the pantry from Shepherd he'd had in the 90s, good stainless bowls up on a wooden stand about knee height, the kind every feed store in the county will tell you is better for a big dog's digestion. He put 2 cups of kibble in it, and set it down by the stove. The dog looked at the bowl, walked a slow half circle around it, looked at Vry, sat down 4 feet away, and did not move. Vry gave it a while. Then he picked the bowl out of the stand, set it flat on the floor, and stepped back. The dog ate like a man who hadn't eaten in a week. Vry stood there with the empty wooden stand in his hands, and a feeling working up through him that he did not like even a little bit, because he had put 4 decades into the fire service, and he knew what he was looking at. He was looking at a body that had learned, somewhere, that lifting its head was a bad idea. Bedtime was the worst of it. He'd made up a blanket in the corner of the front room by the wood stove, a folded quilt of Ruth's that he had no other use for and no heart to throw away. The dog didn't take it. The dog walked to the interior wall, put his hindquarters against the plaster, and sat. And stayed sitting. Vry read 40 pages of a paperback he'd read before. Every time he looked up, the dog was upright against that wall with his eyes half closed and his chin held at that angle, that same off-plumb tilt, 5 or 8 degrees off true, like a picture hung by a man in a hurry. Twice the big head dipped towards sleep, and both times the dog caught it and brought it back up, and the muscle along the side of his neck jumped. He wasn't guarding. He wasn't refusing to settle. He'd found the one position in the room that didn't hurt, and he was going to hold it all night. At 11:40, Vry set the book down. He got out of the chair, went across the floor, and lowered himself all the way down, knees first, then the hip that hadn't been right since 1994, then his back flat against the same wall about 3 feet away. It took him some doing to get down there, and it was going to take more to get back up. He didn't reach out. He didn't lean over. He'd spent a career learning that a man on his side, in a ditch with a steering column across his chest, will fight you if you come at him from over the top, and will let you work if you come in low and let him see your hands. So Vry turned his left palm up, the one with the burn scar climbing out of the cuff, and held it open at the height of his own chest. Not above the dog, not toward the neck, just out there in the air, empty at the level of a heart. He didn't say anything either. Nothing worth saying. The dog looked at the hand for a long moment. Then he leaned and put his enormous head into it, the whole weight of it. 15 pounds of skull and jaw and muzzle straps settling into an open palm, warm through the wire, and a long breath going out of him that Vry felt in his own ribs. He did not move for 20 minutes. Vry's arm went numb somewhere around minute 9, and he held it anyway. And at some point in there, the dog's eyes closed all the way for the first time in 31 days, and an old man sat on the floor of his own front room in the dark and let his hand go dead rather than take it back. Tuesday morning, he drove to the co-op for a 50-pound bag of food and a flat collar, because he was not going to walk into a courtroom on Friday with a dog in a chain. The Ozark County Farmers Co-op sits at the north edge of town with a loading dock, a coffee pot nobody cleans, and a feed counter where 4 men over 60 are always standing. Vry had left the dog in the bed of the truck on a tether with the window slid open, which was how it got started. The man came in behind him at the counter while the clerk was writing the ticket. Rel Tanner was 47 and looked like the outdoors had been sanding on him since he was 20. Sun-cut face, deep lines out of the corners of his eyes, and none anywhere near his mouth. Jaw shaved that morning and already showing. 6 foot, even, thick through the forearms. He wore a tan canvas guide vest, and the right shoulder of that vest was worn smooth and shiny in a patch the size of coffee cup saucer, the way canvas goes when 10,000 rounds of gun but have set into the same place. Ball cap, boots that cost more than the truck they came in, and out in the gravel, on the door of a white 3/4 ton, a laminated placard screwed on at the corners. Ozark Ridge Guide Service, trophy whitetail and turkey, 22 years. Deacon, Tanner said. Rel, been a minute. Tanner set his elbow on the counter. He was looking out the plate glass at the truck bed. That's a hell of a lot of dog you got out there. He is that. Brindle bull, Tanner said. That the one out of the shelter? Vry took his change and folded it. It is. Huh. Tanner kept looking. Something happened to his face that Vry, who had spent 30 years reading men in the worst 10 minutes of their lives, cataloged without meaning to. Not surprise. Recognition, and behind it a fast, tight calculation like a man checking a figure he'd already worked once. That's that stray that used to hang around the creek. down in the Weatherby Bottoms. Used to come up on my client stands 4 or 5 years back. Never could catch him. Didn't know he was local. Everything's local. Tanner smiled with the bottom half of his face. Listen, I'll tell you what. You don't need that headache. You want, I'll take him off your hands and handle it quiet. No charge. I got the truck. I got the place for it. Nobody's got to fill out a thing. The clerk kept his eyes on his ticket book. He's court custody, Vry said. County's got a hearing Friday. Then that's even easier. County don't care how a dangerous dog ends up gone. Deacon, they care that he's gone. Tanner shifted his weight. I'm doing you a kindness here. Appreciated. No. Tanner let a beat go by. That should have been the end of it. That is where a man who is only being neighborly says all right, well, and goes and buys his mineral block. He's a liability, Tanner said. 120 pounds with a bite record. You get one bad second with a kid at the fire station, and they'll come after your house. You're what, 63? 64? A man your age doesn't need a lawsuit dragging behind him. No, he doesn't. So let me help you. No, Vry said again, and picked up his receipt. He was 2 steps toward the door when Tanner said it. I'd just as soon see him put down easy, is all. Way I heard it, that dog got into something he shouldn't have back in 21. Vry stopped walking. He stood in the co-op with a 50-pound bag on a handcart and looked at the door glass. And in the glass he could see the reflection of a man in a canvas vest. And out past that reflection, the shape of a brindle head lifted up over the side of a truck bed. Nobody at the shelter knew where the dog came from. No microchip, no tag, no owner, no reports. The intake sheet said found, Howell R.D., in unknown history. Marlaquist had used the word nobody 4 separate times. And Vry had not said one word about a year. 21, Vry said. Just talk. You know how it is. Tanner had already turned toward the coffee pot. Small county. It is that, Vry said and went out. He sat in the cab for a minute and a half with his hands on the wheel and his heart going harder than a conversation at a feed counter had any business making it go. In a mirror, Tanner came out, stood on the dock a second, and looked at the dog in the bed of Vry's truck for a good deal longer than a man looks at a dog he can't catch. The dog looked back. Wednesday at 2, Vry paid $480 of his own money at the Lemke Veterinary Clinic on Highway 5 for a full-body radiographic series on a dog that legally was not his and that in 48 hours a judge was probably going to order killed. Dr. Ada Lemke was 34. Red-brown hair up in a knot with a pin through it. Mint green scrubs, forearms freckled to the elbow, and the fastest hands Vry had ever watched work on an animal. She had the sedation in and the plates set with the kind of economy you only get from doing a thing 3,000 times. She'd asked once why he wanted a whole series instead of the neck. Because I don't know where it is, Vry said, and neither do you. Where what is? Whatever it is. She looked at him a second and then said, fair enough, and went to work. They pulled the films at 3:20. Lemke killed the overheads and brought them up on the wall monitor, and she talked as she scrolled. Hips clean, chest clean, no fluid, no masses, old healed rib on the left, some arthritis at the stifle. Her voice was easy and professional and moving right along. Then the cervical series came up. Lemke stopped talking. She stopped scrolling too. Her hand came off the mouse and went up to her mouth and stayed there. On the monitor, in the gray and black architecture of the dog's neck, sitting hard against the body of the 6 cervical vertebra, was a perfect, bright, white sphere. Round, absolutely round, blazing white against the bone, the way only metal comes up on film. Nobody in the room said anything for a good 10 seconds. The compressor kicked on out back. Somewhere up front a phone rang 4 times and quit. Mr. Vry, Lemke said finally, and her voice had gone flat and careful. That's a pellet. She leaned in and traced with a fingertip that didn't quite touch the glass. See this haze all around it? That's fibrous tissue. Scar. That's years of it. That's not months. That's years of the body walling something off and failing. And here, she moved her finger a 1/4 inch. This is the C6 nerve root. That sphere is sitting on it. It's not near it. It's on it. Meaning what? Lemke turned around and looked at him in the dark with a monitor light on the side of her face. Meaning every single thing in that file is one thing, she said. The head angle. He's holding his neck in the one position that takes pressure off that root, and he can't stop holding it, awake or asleep. He won't go under a low doorway, because ducking loads it. He won't eat out of a raised bowl, because extending up loads it. He won't lie down flat, because getting down and back up loads it. She pulled a breath, and a hand coming over the top of that neck and pressing down on it is going to feel like somebody putting a screwdriver through his shoulder into his teeth. Handler 1 reached for the collar. Handler 2 toweled the shoulders. Handler 3 leaned down to fit the muzzle. All 3 from above, Vry said. All 3 right onto it. Lemke's jaw moved. 3 bites in 11 weeks, and every one of them from a hand landing on a nerve. That's not aggression, Mr. Vry. That's a reflex. Somebody hit that dog with a shotgun and left it in him and then wrote him up as dangerous for having a spine. Vry did not say anything. He was looking at the white sphere. Lemke turned back to the screen and frowned, and it was a different frown than the first one. She clicked twice, changed the window, made the image go colder and harder. Leaned closer. "Ah," she said. "What?" "The density's wrong." She measured something with 2 clicks. Lead reads a certain way on film. Steel reads another way, brighter edge, harder contrast. This is neither one. It's reading light for lead. Look at the boundary, it's soft. She sat back. That's bismuth. Bismuth tin, probably. It's a non-toxic waterfowl alloy, and it's brittle as chalk. You don't see it stay round like that, and you sure don't see it around here. I've pulled maybe 200 pellets out of dogs in this county. Every one was lead or steel. Nobody shoots bismuth in Ozark County. It's $4 a shell, and the only people who use it are handloaders who won't shoot anything else. The room was very quiet. Vry stood in the dark of that exam room with his hat in his hand and the monitor throwing gray light on the front of his coat, and he heard, as clearly as if he were standing in wet leaves under a hillside on a Sunday night in October, a highway patrol sergeant telling a fire chief he didn't need to know anything, that the lab had recovered an unusual shot alloy, something rare, something they were keeping close, and that they'd find a man who loaded it. Bismuth, Vry said. "That's my read. I've heard that word one time in my life." He put his hat on. Nash Farrell. Lemke's hands went still on the desk. "The game warden," she said. 19 feet off the creek on Weatherby, October of 21. I was the second man to him. Vry's voice didn't rise at all. That was the thing about him that people remembered later. They never said much. They said the shot was unusual. Lemke looked at the white sphere on her own monitor for a long moment. "I'll have my written finding to you by tomorrow noon," she said. Friday morning, the Ozark County Courthouse in Gainesville was cold enough inside that people kept their coats on. 9 a.m., second floor. The small hearing room with 11 chairs and a wall clock that ran 4 minutes fast. The county attorney was a careful man named Del Prather who had the file tabbed in 3 colors, and he moved for the order in about 90 seconds. 3 documented bites in 11 weeks, 31 days under a court-ordered muzzle, an animal of 120 pounds with no known owner and no known history, and a statutory finding of dangerous already entered on the 14th. He asked for destruction. He asked for it that day. Marla Quist was called, and she read the bite log because she was under oath and it was her log. Handler 1, 22 stitches. Handler 2, puncture through the thumb web. Handler 3, for sutures and a workers' comp claim. She read every line of it. Then she said, without being asked, "I've had that dog 11 weeks, and he has never once come at anybody who wasn't touching his neck." And Prather objected to it, and the judge let the objection stand. Then Vry stood up. He had a manila envelope, a canvas coat he'd had since the Clinton administration, and Ruth's ring on a bootlace under his shirt. "Judge, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to pretend at it," he said. "I'm going to hand up 2 things." He handed up 11 radiographs and 1 page from a licensed veterinarian. That bright spot on the neck plate is a shotgun pellet. It's been sitting against the 6th vertebra in that dog's spine long enough to build years of scar tissue around itself, and it's laying on the nerve. Dr. Lemke's finding is that all 3 bites in that log are a pain response to a hand coming down on that exact spot, and she will testify to it. He set his hand flat on the rail. That's the first thing. Here's the second thing, and it's the only thing I'm asking for. That pellet isn't lead, and it isn't steel. It's a bismuth alloy hand load, and there's a state ballistics file 4 years old in this county with that word in it, and a dead conservation agent attached to it. If you sign that order this morning, at 11 o'clock the county is going to put down a dog and incinerate the only piece of physical evidence in the Nash feral homicide. The wall clock filled up the whole room. I'm asking for 48 hours, Vry said, and one phone call to Jefferson City. Prather started to say something about the statute. The judge held up one finger, looked at the top radiograph for 11 full seconds, and recessed the hearing until 10:15. The hallway outside had a marble floor and a bench and a water fountain with a sign on it. People came out of the room in that shuffling way people do, and Marla brought the dog out on the leash because Vry had his hands full of paper. There were maybe 9 people in that hallway. One of them was a man in a canvas vest with the shoulder worn smooth, standing by the stairs with his cap in his hands, who had signed nothing, filed nothing, and had no business in a dangerous dog hearing at all. 31 days that dog had wore a muzzle. 31 days of strangers, vet techs, deputies, 3 separate handlers, kids at the shelter fence, the woman who ran the mop bucket down the kennel row every evening. Not once, in any of it, had he so much as turned his head at a person walking by. He got 4 feet down the hallway and planted. All 120 pounds went down into the marble at once. The leash came tight, and Marla's arm went straight out, and she said his file number out loud like a startled schoolteacher. He didn't pull. He didn't lunge. He stood absolutely still with his front feet set and his weight forward and his whole body, feet, shoulders, that crooked skull, all of it turning together the way it always did, swung around toward stairs. And out of him, through the wire of that muzzle, came one long, low sound from somewhere down under the ribs. Not a bark, not a snarl, something older than either one, and it went on for maybe 3 seconds and filled that marble hallway from one end to the other. Everything in the corridor stopped. The dog was not looking at the crowd. He was not looking at the deputy or the fountain or the door. His eyes were locked on one man by the stairs, and every single person in that hallway followed the line of them and arrived at the same place. Rel Tanner had gone the color of the floor. He got his cap on his head, said something that wasn't words, and went down those stairs fast. Marla Quist said, later, that she had never in 9 years at that shelter seen an animal do that. The bailiff said it. A woman from the assessor's office who'd come out to see what the noise was said it. And a sheriff's investigator named Boyd Reesner, who had come to the hearing for no reason except that his captain had told him to sit in on anything with the word bismuth in it, stood at the end of that hallway with his notebook already out and asked the room who that man was. 3 people told him. He wrote the name down. Judge Holland Speck did not delay Friday for a dog with a bite history. He delayed it for a piece of metal. The order he signed at 11:40 that morning was 4 sentences long, and it did not use the word dangerous once. It said the animal was to be held in the custody of Deacon Vry pending the recovery of a foreign body from the cervical spine, that the recovery was to be performed by a licensed veterinary surgeon with a law enforcement evidence technician present in the room, and that the object recovered was to go directly into the hands of the Missouri State Highway Patrol Crime Laboratory in Jefferson City. Chain of custody unbroken from the neck to the lab bench. The surgery happened 11 days later at a teaching hospital in Columbia on a table under lights, so bright they made the brindle coat look gray. A resident shaved a 6-inch patch behind the skull. The surgeon went in through the side of the neck, worked down through 4 years of scar tissue that had grown around the thing like bark grows around barbed wire. And at 2:14 in the afternoon, he lifted out a metal sphere a little smaller than a garden pea and dropped it into a stainless bowl held by a deputy named Boyd Reesner. It made a sound. Everybody in that room heard it. The bill was $9,040. Vry signed for it, standing at a counter with Ruth's wedding band swinging on its bootlace under his shirt, and he did not have $9,000. Sergeant Ivy Coldren had the Pellet on her bench by Monday morning. She was 52, a silver bob-cut blunt at the jaw, wireframe glasses she pushed up with one knuckle, a plain navy blazer worn over a lab coat, and a badge on a lanyard that she had a habit of turning face down when she worked. 26 years in firearms and tool marks. She had testified in 11 states, and she had, in a locked evidence drawer 4 feet from where she was standing, for pellets recovered in October of 2021 from the chest and shoulder of a 38-year-old Missouri Department of Conservation agent named Nash Farrell, and she had looked at those 4 pellets more times than she could count, because nobody had ever brought her a fifth. Beatsmutin, not lead, not steel, an alloy a hand loader buys in ingots and casts himself, in a county where almost nobody bothers. She spent 2 days on it. Composition first. The spectrometer put the new pellet and the old 4 within a whisker of each other. Same ratio of bismuth to tin, same trace of the same contaminant. The kind of match you get from one melt in one pot in one man's shop. Then the comparison scope. Because a cast pellet does not come out of a mold clean. It comes out with the mold's own scars on it. A hairline ridge where the 2 halves of the die didn't quite meet, a nick in the cavity, a tiny crescent left by a sprue cutter that had been dropped on a concrete floor once and never trued up. Cauldron set the 5th pellet on one stage and one of Farrell's on the other, and turned the barrel until the 2 halves of the split field lined up. The ridge ran straight across. She called Ozark County at 4:50 on a Wednesday afternoon and said 7 words that a sheriff's investigator had been waiting 4 years and 7 months to hear. The search warrant on the shop behind Rel Tanner's house was served on a Thursday at 6:15 in the morning. Deputies photographed the reloading bench before they touched it. A single-stage press bolted to 2-inch oak, a scale, a coffee can of wads, and on the shelf above it a shotshell die set, and a lead pot with a residue in the bottom that the lab would later put a number to. In a plastic milk crate under the bench, 11 ingots of bismuth tin alloy, hand-poured into a muffin tin. The same way people have been casting shot in that country since before anybody's grandfather. And in a shoebox of paperwork in the same crate, a receipt. 12 pounds of bismuth shot alloy, purchased mail order, dated the 14th of September, 2021. 26 days before Nash Farrell went into that hollow on Weatherby Creek and didn't come out. They took him at his kitchen table with his coffee still going. The interview room in Gainesville is small and beige and has a camera in the upper corner that nobody bothers to hide. Tanner sat in it for 2 hours and 11 minutes with his lawyer beside him and said almost nothing. And then Boyd Reesner slid across the table an 8x10 photograph of 5 pellets in a row, for in a line, and one apart from them, with a number underneath it and the word cervical. Tanner looked at the 5th one for a long time. Then he asked, on the record, whether the dog was still alive. Reesner told him yes. And Rel Tanner, 47 years old, 20 years in the guide business, leaned back in a plastic chair and explained himself out loud in a flat voice, the way a man explains a fence line to a neighbor. He said Farrell had been on him for 2 seasons. Said the man had photographs of his baited stands, had a game camera he'd never found, had documented out-of-season kills on 3 different leases and taken statements from 2 of his own clients. Said Farrell had come up his driveway in August of that year and told him what was coming, a referral, a hearing, license revocation, the whole thing. 20 years, Tanner said. 20 years of my life. Over a few deer. He said he went into the hollow that morning to talk to him. He said the talking didn't go the way he wanted it to. And then he said the part that no one in that room ever fully got over. He said after the shot, out of the brush came Farrell's dog. Not a stray. Not something that hung around the creek. Farrell's own, a young brindle Bullmastiff that rode in the truck with him, that had a name on a set of vet records in Theodosia, that had been 40 yards off working a brush pile when it heard the report and came back for its man at a dead run. Tanner said it came straight at him. He said he turned and fired the second barrel. He said the dog went down, got up and ran, and he stood there and watched it go into the timber, and he figured it would die in there within the hour, and he never looked for it. And for 4 years he had assumed there was nothing left of that morning in the world but himself. He was wrong by 1 pellet. The trial took 9 days in a courthouse 40 miles from where it happened. On the 4th day, Sergeant Ivy Cauldron stood in front of a jury of 12 with a lab badge turned face out for once, and held up a small glass vial between 2 fingers so the light caught what was inside it, and beside her on an easel was the photograph of the 4 pellets taken from Nash Farrell's body. Then the toolmark comparison went up on the screen. 2 halves of one image, a hairline ridge crossing from the left field into the right without a break, magnified 40 times, in a courtroom where you could hear the radiator. The prosecutor asked her how many shotguns in the state of Missouri could have produced both. Coldren said the shotgun was not the point. The mold was the point, and there was one. After that, they played the tape. 11 minutes of it, on the record, in the beige room, Tanner's own voice filling the courtroom, while Tanner sat 12 feet away with his hands folded, saying 20 years and a few deer, and I figured it died in there. The jury was out for 5 hours and 40 minutes. Second-degree murder. Armed criminal action. Life eligible, 30 years minimum. The Farrell family had posted a reward in the spring of 2022, $500,000, raised from the sale of Nash's grandfather's land and held in trust by a lawyer in Springfield for information leading to a conviction. 4.5 years, and nobody had ever collected a dollar of it because there had never been anything to collect on. They paid it to Deacon Vry. He sat in that lawyer's office in his canvas coat with his hat on his knee and did not say much. The first check he wrote out of it, before he'd left the parking lot, was $9,040, made out to a country veterinary clinic in Ozark County. Memo line. Paid in full. Ada Lemke framed nothing and cashed it and put a new digital plate in the back room with it, which is what he'd hoped she'd do and never said. The dangerous dog designation came off the books on a Tuesday. The hearing took 2 minutes. The county attorney moved to vacate his own petition. Marla Quist read 4 sentences from the shelter's amended record. Nobody in the gallery rose to oppose it. Judge Speck signed and said the animal was released from all conditions, including the muzzle order, effective immediately. Vry walked out to the truck, unbuckled the wire basket off that big crooked head for the last time, and dropped it in the scrap bin behind the fire station on the way home. It landed on top of a length of busted ladder rail and stayed there. 11 weeks after the surgery, on a Saturday in September, the Ozark County Volunteer Fire Station dedicated a memorial to Nash Farrell in the gravel lot in front of the 2-bay metal building. 400 people came to a station that serves 900. Conservation agents drove in from 6 counties and stood in green in a line at the back. There was a bronze plaque on a limestone base with his name and his dates, and there was a glass case beside it. And in that case, on a folded piece of station cloth, was a scorched aluminum flashlight with the lens melted out of it, which had sat in a coffee can on a workbench in a farmhouse for 4 years because nobody ever came to claim it. His widow, Carly Farrell, 39, held the leash, and the dog walked. 120 pounds of brindle Bullmastiff went down the whole length of that crowd with no muzzle on his face, and his head was level, not cocked, not held out at that stiff, wrong angle, not turning with his shoulders like a thing built out of one piece. Just a big dog's head, swinging easy, taking in 400 strangers on both sides of him, going where the leash went. He had a name again. It was on a set of vet records from 2019 in a file in Theodosia, on a card that said Farrell, and the name was Bishop. The chief read the therapy dog certification out loud off a single sheet of paper, and a girl of about 9 from the auxiliary pinned the tag to his collar. And then Bishop walked over to the limestone base on his own, turned around twice the way dogs have done since before there were fire stations, and lay down under the plaque with his chin on his feet. He hadn't lain down flat in the shelter, not once in 11 weeks. Nobody there had ever seen him do it. Deacon Vry stood at the back with his hat off and Ruth's band on its bootlace under his collar. And when somebody from the county paper asked him for a few words, he took a while getting to them. He said 3 people were bitten by that dog. 3 trained handlers, doing their jobs, reaching for a collar, a towel, a muzzle strap. And every one of them wrote it down and passed it up the line, and not one of them, not one in 11 weeks, ever asked the only question that mattered. Now what did he do? What hurts? He said, "We got a word we use for a thing that snaps when you come down on top of it. And the word is dangerous. And half the time what we actually mean is that we never once looked inside it. That it's cheaper to write the report than to buy the picture. That a file with 3 lines in it will get a living thing killed on a Friday morning, and everybody signing it will go home and sleep fine, because the paperwork was correct. 11 weeks in a kennel. 31 days in a wire basket muzzle. A hearing at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning that was supposed to end with a needle by 10. 120 pounds of dog that 3 handlers called vicious and 1 man called hurt. And 1 piece of bismuth tin shot, the size of a pea, sitting against a sixth cervical vertebra where nobody thought to look, which is the only reason a game warden's murder went unsolved for 4 years, 7 months, and 9 days. Bishop has been in that station 3 years now. He rides the engine on standbys. He sits with people on the worst morning of their lives while the wrecker works. He has never bitten anyone again. Not once. Not one time since the day that Pellet came out. So here's the only question worth asking. The paperwork on your desk says dangerous. 3 handlers in writing. The hearing is Friday at 9. And the x-ray is $400 out of your own pocket, and nobody, not the county, not the shelter, not one person in that building, thinks it's worth taking. Would you have paid for it? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments.